When we're songwriting, it can be very important to take a step back and start asking ourselves questions about the song that we're writing to make sure that we're on the right track and not writing something that later we'll look back at and be like, ooh, what was I even thinking? So let's talk about 4 simple questions for us to ask while we're songwriting. So the first question to ask yourself while you're writing a song is this relatable? Because at the end of the day, nobody cares about your love of Star Wars or your love of chocolate ice cream. And that may sound obvious to you. You may say, Joseph, I would never write a song about my love of Star Wars or chocolate ice cream because I know that nobody cares that I love those things. I am going to talk, though, about my breakup that happened last week. But here's the thing. Nobody really cares about that either. And even though it may hurt to think about that, it's true, right? Like when you're listening to a song about a breakup, when you're connecting with that song, it's not because you think, oh, I feel so bad for this person with their breakup. I can't identify with it at all, but that sounds rough. No, we're taking our experiences with us as we're singing along with this song that connects with us. The reason it connects with us is not because the artist just does a good job communicating their story. It's because they do a good job communicating their story while keeping it universal enough for you or I to identify with parts of it and be able to put ourselves in their shoes or remember how we felt when we were in a very similar, if not exactly the same scenario. So no matter where you are on the spectrum from talking about your love of chocolate ice cream over vanilla ice cream, which of course is the only correct opinion, or whether you're talking about your breakup, no matter where in that spectrum it is, at the end of the day, it needs to be something that is relatable. If it's not, then your song is probably going to fall flat because no one really cares about my story or your story, but they do care about how they can connect with our stories and how they can reflect and see their own lives and their own experiences mirrored in what we're communicating in our songs. The next question to ask ourselves is, are we bringing anything new to the table? And you may have heard that there's nothing new under the sun, which is true from a certain point of view, because overall our thoughts are very likely to not be something completely new. At the end of the day, we're going to have songs about some of the same things that have been talked about many, many times, whether that be heartbreak or the loss of a loved one. Those are things that have been said before, but they are also universal experiences that are some of the main things for us to actually be able to relate to. To my earlier point, you can't be writing songs about your love of chocolate chip ice cream and how it is much better at this one local store than it is from the Hershey's brand because nobody cares. Would that be totally new? Would that be the first song that said that? Yes, but nobody cares. What can be different, even though we are going to talk about some of the same things such as love and loss of love and life and the end of life, what can really separate us is not our thoughts, but how we voice our thoughts, how we talk through things. So let's take a really simple example. I had a song where I had the line, "'Cause nothing's the same now that you've gone away," which is a giant snooze fest. That has been said in those exact words or very similar words approximately 10 trillion times. Who cares? The answer? Nobody. It's been said a million times. I'm bringing nothing new to the table. What if we just try wording it in a different way where we're communicating that same idea that nothing's been the same and that you're sad and you haven't really gotten over the fact that somebody is no longer with you? So what if we say instead, "Through thousands of sunsets, my heart aches the same"? Now, really, it's fundamentally saying about the same thing. You could say the second version is certainly more specific because when we say thousands of sunsets, we're communicating an actual length of time. You could say it's at least implied to be 6+ years because it's thousands of sunsets and 1,000 sunsets. 1,000 days would be approximately 3 years, a little north of 3 years. Therefore, if it's thousands multiple, that means at least 6 years. Sure, yeah, that's true. But really, we're basically saying the same thing. The only difference is this is saying it in a different, more fresh way. Now, am I the first person to word it that way? Probably not. But it is certainly something that has been much less used. Certainly, I'm aware of no other use of it. Again, I'm sure somebody else has used it. But it's not been something that's been said 5 trillion times or 10 trillion times the way that "'cause nothing's the same now since you've gone away" has been said. So when you're communicating something, even though the general idea of what you're communicating will almost definitely not be something that's new, we should try to find different new ways to communicate that same thing. So while there may not be any truly new ideas, our goal should be to breathe fresh air into old ideas rather than just recycling old ideas as they are. The next question to ask ourselves is, does our song have anything that causes us to roll our eyes or cringe a little bit? Because that's usually a good sign that it needs some more work. Some examples of things that usually make people cringe are things like a rhyme scheme, or specifically certain rhymes that are kind of cringy because you can tell that they're super forced. You can tell that they just sort of change the lyrics in order to get that night light rhyme rather than just saying what they intend to say, or pulling a Hey Soul Sister, where that entire song is an incredibly regrettable example of how to not do rhyming, where there's tons of words that rhyme, that don't fit, that don't have any meaning, that are empty and meaningless, and just overall super cringe. Other things that usually cause us to roll our eyes are cliches. I sort of picked on that in the last one because nothing's the same now that you've gone away. That's a cliche, right? It's been said a million times. Or maybe you're begging please on your knees. Again, it's been said a million times. Nobody cares. That makes people check out of songs. That makes you hopefully cringe when you see it or roll your eyes, and that is something that needs to be changed. And then another thing that probably most of you aren't doing, but pop music does this constantly, and that is pop culture references. There's nothing that instantly dates your music like a pop culture reference, because by definition, something that's a pop culture reference is going to have sort of an expiration date on it. If you're referencing something that is relevant in the culture today, that might not be relevant in 2 years, that means in 2 years, people are like, what on earth is that song talking about? Rather than talking about timeless concepts that whether it was written in 1500 or 2500 will still ring the same way. Because we're not talking about certain pop cultural things, we're instead talking about big picture human experiences. Heartbreak will generally feel the same way 3,000 years from now that it would have felt 3,000 years ago. But if you reference something like Gangnam Style, within 5 years, kids probably already won't know what that's talking about, and maybe half the rest of the world will have forgotten about it. Either way, it dates your music, and it comes across super corny and cringe, so that's another thing to make sure to avoid. Another thing that often results in eye rolls are super overdone lyrics. So if you repeat the same thing over and over again, you just kind of word it in a different way, or you just are overly emotional about something, or just it being generally overdone. That is usually what causes that cringe eye roll effect. For example, Grenade by Bruno Mars is a great example of exactly what I'm talking about. The entire chorus is basically him just repeating one insane claim after the other of just how insanely in love he allegedly is. That he would catch a grenade for ya and run in front of a train for ya. Really, it all means the same thing, right? I'd die for you. He just says it in 500 different stupid, really lame ways that make you think, does this guy need like a psych evaluation? Like what's going on? Why would you catch a grenade for Stop it. What are you doing? Also, Bruno Mars is not catching a grenade for anyone. A general tip that I'll give to do with overdone lyrics, and kind of just a general rule overall, is just like in humor, with songwriting, you want minor hyperbole because it still needs to be believable. Because things are funny when you take a character and slightly hyperbolize them, but yet the character still seems like somebody who could exist, somebody that you could know. You just kind of overdo it a little bit. If you overdo it so much and somebody becomes a caricature, that's usually when it stops becoming funny because it's not even true anymore. And in order to be funny, it needs to be based on truth. It can't be so devoid of truth that you're like, yeah, I mean, I guess that could be funny, but like nobody is like that. No, nobody does that. In the same way, if your songs are totally unbelievable and it's about stuff or saying stuff that nobody buys for a second, then nobody's going to connect with it. And the last question to ask while you're songwriting is, do you have any tattoo lyrics? So what do I mean by tattoo lyrics? Well, tattoo lyrics are just the name I give to lyrics that I think are something that would be worthy of being tattooed on somebody's body. Now, you don't have to be pro-tattoo. I personally would never get a tattoo. I'm not interested in tattoos, but the concept remains. The idea is this lyric something that's so good and so meaningful that somebody out there might want to tattoo it to their skin? It's something that would resonate with somebody so much, that finds such a beautiful way of saying something that would be worthy of being forever enshrined in ink in somebody's skin. And again, whether or not you would ever get a tattoo of it is not really the question. The question really is this a lyric that somebody might actually want to tattoo to their skin? Or is it something that isn't really very meaningful or impactful and nobody would ever get a tattoo of it? So for example, I just Googled Goo Goo Dolls lyrics tattoos, and some of the things that came up were "The end of fear is where we begin," "Scars are souvenirs you never lose," and "Yeah, you bleed just to know you're alive." All of these are going to lean more towards the hits. For example, about 50% of the results were all from Iris. But whenever you Google this for any artist, you'll start to see some of the same lines come up over and over again, and they tend to be some of the better, more impactful lines. They don't tend to be throwaway lines that nobody would consider noteworthy. They're the type of line that make people remember them. They're lines that are worthy of being noted. They're worthy of being memorized. They're the type that even if the whole rest of the verse they didn't know a single lyric from, they're like, yes, I know this one part. Yeah, you bleed just to know you're alive. That part I remember. That is what a tattoo lyric is. So hopefully you found this helpful, and if you did, something else you'll find helpful is my free 6-step lyric writing checklist. It will walk you all the way from just a general idea of what your lyric might be about all the way through to a completed lyric that you can be proud of and that passes what I like to call the frame test. The frame test is basically just the idea of if you printed out your lyrics, put it in a frame and put it on the wall, would it pass as poetry? Would it be something that would be worthy of being read even without any crutch of music or melody making it feel emotional and making it feel powerful? If you strip all that away, are the words on their own great lyrics and great poetry? Because we don't want to rely on the crutch that a great melody can be and that great music can be. Now, we want to also have a great melody and also have a great arrangement and chords and cool guitar riffs. Yes, that's all great, but we don't want our lyrics to rely on those things. We want our lyrics to be great on their own. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check out my 6-step lyric writing checklist, link in the description down below. It's so important to break your lyric writing into steps because often I think the reason why people struggle so much with lyrics is they kind of bring up a blank page and say to themselves, time to write lyrics, which is basically expecting yourself to improvise good poetry, which is asking way too much of yourself. So of course it's going to be a struggle. If you break it down into smaller baby steps, it's going to become much, much easier to end up with a lyric that you can be proud of. So if you're interested in that, be sure to check it out. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I'll talk to you in the next one.